see this evening. I begin to appreciate why, after the Hespedim at the end of a Levaya, we ask Mechila. And so, at the beginning, I would like to ask Mechila from the family if, at any point, I or anybody else does not say enough about your mother, sister, sister-in-law, cousin, because we don't have enough time to say enough. There will not be enough time. Some of us have been preparing these remarks for 3 months and we get a minute and a half. And there will not be enough time. And so I'm going to ask Mechila on behalf of all of us, if we don't say enough, there isn't enough time. And I'm sorry. Welcome to an evening of a shared grief, Nichum Avelim and Chizuk for our entire community, on the loss of our friend, teacher, family member, and so many other roles she filled for all of us. Chana Rochel bas Moshe Simcha Halevi Aleh Shalom, a dear, upbeat, and positive friend and private confidant of so many, a caring teacher, respectful of students' individual strengths and sensitivities, a tireless Ovedes Hashem in her klal work, and most importantly, an aim b'Yisrael, a loving, joyous wife, mother, daughter, sister-in-law, and sister and cousin to her beloved family. Each with our own memories, lessons learned from Mrs. Stern, we will listen carefully tonight to a small group of speakers out of so many who no doubt have much to say. And we will want to grab for ourselves one or two of the many stellar midos that will be spoken about that are available at the time of a person's patira, hanging in the air and more easily accessible at this time for her chevra to adopt on their own. A chance to inherit, if you will, an eternal part of Mrs. Stern's legacy. I would like to open with a tiny one of my own. A midah I saw in the greats. During a camp time visit with Rebbetzin Shani Per, longtime director of camp, I remarked on the beauty of the scarf that she was ironing in preparation for an event. At the end of that summer, Rebbetzin Per handed me the scarf, beautifully wrapped as a gift. After a Tu B'Shvat visit to the Satmar Rebbetzin here in North Miami Beach, where I remarked on how tasty her esrog jelly was, she accompanied me to the door, retrieving a jar along the way to give me to take home to my family. After mentioning to Mrs. Stern that wearing a baseball cap on top of a shito is often hot in summertime, she brought me what she claimed was an old wig. Here, she said, I have others. You can cut off the hair from the top and it will be much cooler. The greats, they hear what people really need and they give even when they are not asked. At this point, I would like to introduce Mrs. Batsheva Marlowe, a friend, colleague, teacher, and mentor to so many, and a close friend and colleague of Mrs. Stern. Mrs. Marlowe will begin with 2 prakim of Tehillim, followed by memories of Mrs. Stern and Chizuk. Mrs. Marlowe.
Chashuva Talmidos, colleagues, parents, and everybody who cannot be present but is with us. And Being with us is not limited to the physical world. I just want to mention a letter that was written in Sefer Alei Shor, where Ravolba in the Sefer, the letter is written by a father in anticipation of the time that he would no longer be physically present with his family, written and put away for a time that he hoped would be many, many, many years later. And in that letter, he reminds his children that in this world, as close as we may be, and we're sitting closely side by side here, we are physical, we are finite. There are laws of space and time and place, and as such, there's division. But in the world that is not physical, there's absolutely no division. So anyone who is no longer a part of this physical world is closer with us than the possibility enabled them to be when they were actually here amongst us. And so, with that feeling and with that understanding, we open the evenings with the words of David HaMelech, who himself is the mouthpiece and the heart of Klal Yisrael, who better to be able to give us chizuk, so we can tap into the words of Tehillim as we say, Kuf Chaf Aleph and Kuf Lamed. And this should be an aliyah, Le'iloi Nishmas, Chana Rochel, Bas, Moshe Simcha Halevi. Kuf Chaf Aleph. Shir Lamalos, Esa Einai El Heharim, Me'ayin Yavo Esri. Esri Me'im Adonai, Osei Shamayim Baretz. Al Yitei Lamot Raglecha, Al Yanun Shomrecha. Hinei Lo Yanun V'lo Yishan Shomer Yisrael. Adonai Shomrecha, Adonai Tzilcha Al Yad Yeminecha. Yomam Hashemesh Lo Yakecha V'yareach Balayla. Adonai Yishmarcha Mikol Ra, Yishmar Es Nafshecha. Adonai Yishmar Tzeischo Boecha Me'ata Ba'ad Olam. Kuf Lamed. Shir Hamalos Mimamakim Krasicha Adonai. Adonai Shema B'koli Tiyena Aznecha Kashuvos L'kol Tachanunai. Im Avonos Tishmarya Adonai Mi Yamod. Ki Emecha Hasalicha Liman Tivarei. Ki V'isi Adonai Kivisa Nafshi V'livaro Hocholti. Nafshi L'Adonai Mi Shomrim L'Boker, Shomrim L'Boker. Yachel Yisrael El Adonai, Ki Im Adonai HaChesed V'Harbei Imo V'Dus. V'hu Yifteh Es Yisrael Mikol Avonosav. Well, the school year gets us going, and so we feel like we're in the swing of things. Just being back in this tent, the last time we were here, was actually right after the Patira, when we had a little kinos of chizuk for those who were still in Miami. And at that time, the speakers addressed in the throes of the gripping pain of the raw shock that had spread through the community and through various communities and through the mountainsides and through the different across the oceans. And the feeling then was so strong and so intense. We were in a matzav, in the state of owning, so flooded with emotion. And as I look around today, as we come back as a family, the bracha of Avelos and the wisdom of the Torah in giving us that time to sit together and to be together, this is the gift that we are afforded with tonight. For we as a family are grieving. It's a Beis Yaakov family, and we have lost such a vital, chashuv member of our family. And so in the moment of experience, in the moment of the Patira itself, we may have been in far-flung places, trying to get a handle, trying to get a grip. And this is our first opportunity to stop, to pause, to come together. And if I would just give that moment of pause, the strength of just being in a room and sitting, we don't have to say a word when we come to be nothing, just the presence of others, being in the moment of pain together is in and of itself very, very healing. And so we dive in, that the Ribono Shel Olam give us the ability to be able to be there for each other and be able to heal. This is the beginning of the journey. But it is a journey. And there will be many times and there will be many moments. When this first happened and I thought of the time of the summer, I thought to myself, so many silver linings, even in times of tragedy. Perhaps this was one, the timing. We never know what the timing will be. Perhaps the silver lining was not having to be in the middle of the school year when it's going to be from one day to the next, and in the midst of the flow of being students and colleagues and teachers' rooms in the active mode. And so, the chesed, the timing was that it was after the year had been completed. Some camps had just started, but we had that time and space and the distance. The flip side of that coin is that now that we are back, and this is our first time getting together, and we are back in school for the first time, so there are going to be those firsts. And there is going to be that feeling of coming into a place, and a teacher's room, and an office, and a courtyard, and having a sense that something doesn't feel right. Now I want to tell you there are many words in the English language that we're very familiar with. There's a word called an outburst, when there's an outburst of emotion, and we get that, we're overwhelmed. But there's another concept that I heard recently, it's called a grief burst. And that is when there's a moment where something hits you so intensely that there's just this expression of a moment that of an emotion that comes from a very deep place. And it's okay. We need to lean into those moments when that grief or that loss hits us for whatever reason. It could be something someone said or did, or a memory, or a song, or a hint of something, and we stop. And it's like riding a wave, and we let it come, and then we let it go. And there will be moments like that. And I think it's important for us to understand that, to anticipate that, to allow for that, and above all, to be patient with ourselves and with others as we heal as a family together. Now you might be thinking, how can we go on? In fact, sitting here in the tent many weeks ago at the start of the summer, we almost didn't want life to go on. How can life go on without our delicious, wonderful Mrs. Stern part of our script? How could it be? It can't. And so there were moments of those intense feelings which are very appropriate for those moments. But I'd like to share with you tonight, and I'd like to, together, come to a little bit of an understanding of how we can not move on because we don't move on, but how we can move forward. And move forward in a way of strength. And move forward toward a vision of taking with and building on. And taking her with us. Taking Chana Rochel, Mrs. Stern's co-host with us. So I'd like to start with a thought that I heard many years ago from Rabbi Yitzchak Kerzner's Rochel. He quoted the Gemara. The Gemara described the time after the Korban. Rabbi Yossi was in the scene, and so was Eliyahu HaNavi. Rabbi Yossi was walking along the path, and the sun was beginning to set. And he noticed, and he said, Shkia, I think I've got to daven. Where am I going to daven? And he noticed a chorva, a dilapidated, abandoned building on the side. So he went into the building, and he davened. Eliyahu HaNavi, passing by, notices and stops and waits for him. Rabbi Yossi comes out of the chorva and walks back to the road and sees Eliyahu HaNavi. Eliyahu greets him and says, Shalom Alecha. And he responds, Shalom Alecha, Rabbi Umari. Eliyahu HaNavi asked, I'm wondering, why did you go in there? And Rabbi Yossi said, it was time to daven. I needed to daven. And Eliyahu HaNavi said to Rabbi Yossi, Ein nechnasin l'chorba. We don't go into abandoned buildings. And Rabbi Yossi said, well, what should I do? I needed to daven. So Eliyahu HaNavi said, V'hamispalo yispalo baderech. So then you continue, you walk, and you daven as you're going. And he said, but I would be interrupted by people who are coming, I might be distracted. So Eliyahu HaNavi said, you daven a short tefillah. Keep it brief. Rabbi Yossi said, I learned 3 things from Eliyahu HaNavi on that day. Number 1, Ein nechnasin l'chorba. We don't go into abandoned buildings, into places of destruction. Number 2, V'hamispalo yispalo baderech. You continue along the way. And number 3, V'hamispalo yispalo tefillah katsara. Rabbi Kerzner took this description and this incident in the Gemara, and he said, when we're faced with Korban, and we're faced with tragedy, and we're experiencing wounds, he said, Ein nechnasin l'chorba. It's not the time and it's not the way to get into the Korban and how and the why and to enter it, to stop and to go into it in a way where we're departing from our mahalach hachayim, from our way of life. And he said that I needed to daven. He said, so you continue. Hamispalo yispalo baderech. Of course we need to understand. And of course we want to get some kind of a havana and understanding so we can move forward. Which is exactly what Eliyahu HaNavi says. Hamispalo yispalo baderech. We keep going. We keep moving. How? And how long and how intricate. V'hamispalo yispalo tefillah katsara. It's appropriate, important that we're gathering here tonight, that we're thinking about this, that we're trying to come out with some kind of a way to reconcile, starting a new year, my focus on the year, and yet I'm focusing on that. How can I reconcile the two? I have so many big emotions. Where do I put them all? And how am I able to take that and make this year and the Hamshach of our life what it is supposed to be? And so with that introduction, there'll be a short explanation, a little bit of understanding of some of the things we might be grappling with, illustrated with many of what our Tanaim, Amoraim themselves have given over to us in the Gemara, and additionally some hashkafos that we can take with us. Then we will thread it in to Chana Rochel herself, and I will use her name, Chana Rochel Bas Moshe Simcha Halevi, to be able to really, really go back to what Mrs. Gross had said, that it's out there for us to grab. And wow, do we have a lot to grab. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi once asked Eliyahu HaNavi, and please be mindful that I will be speaking about Eliyahu HaNavi, with intention. This is the second of what we'll be speaking about. He said, "Can I please come along with you on some of your travels?" He said, "I've been asked before, and I'm tempted to say yes. But there's one condition. You cannot ask me any questions." Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, "That's fine. Maskin, I agree." And so they went along their way. And as they were walking, they came across a small hut in a forest. And Eliyahu Navi comes and he's approaching this hut. And as they're coming closer, an old man and an old woman come out to greet them. With smiles on their faces and a bounce in their step, they say, "Come, please, stop in our house. Can we host you? Can we give you what you need? Please don't pass by." And Eliyahu Navi says, "That's fine. We'd love to." And they spend the night in a very simple home. There was very little for them to share, but share with glee they did. Their meager bread, their water. They had one cow. And that cow gave them milk, and it was that milk that they shared with Eliyahu Navi. They spent one night there. The following morning, they departed. And as they were leaving, Eliyahu Navi says, "I'd like to give you a bracha. I'd like to bless you that your cow should die." Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi was stunned. Is that the blessing you give to a couple that just hosted you with very meager food that they had for themselves, and now they're coming out? And this is what you say? But he knew he couldn't ask. And so, with a troubled heart and acquisitive mind, he continued on the way. They continued their journey, and the second stop was in the home of a very large, sprawling estate belonging to a very wealthy person. The downside of that picture is that this wealthy person liked to keep all that for himself and did not, unlike the first couple, want to welcome anybody in. So when Eliyahu Navi approached him and said, "Can we by any chance stay by you?" He said, "Stay by me? Really, you shouldn't even be talking to me right now. You can go around the back of the house. Somebody will let you in just for a little bit, and please keep it very, very short." They go to the backside. They knock. A curt response. Come on in, treated very roughly. They spend the night. The following morning, as they're leaving, Eliyahu Navi notices that one of the walls of this huge, beautiful mansion is on a slant, on a diagonal. And he looks at the wealthy man and he says, "I give you a blessing that this wall that looks like it needs repair should repair itself on its own. Shouldn't need anybody else to come and fix it." Now Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is baffled. This, that he shouldn't have to deal with construction, which we know is intense, that he shouldn't need to deal with people in his house, that's the blessing you give to someone who didn't even welcome you? He was even more confused and concerned, but he knew he couldn't ask Eliyahu Navi because that was the condition. They continue along their way. It's the next couple of days that they walk, they get to the town, and they come into a shul in the town. They thought somebody there would be able to welcome them, invite them in. They daven mincha, they daven mariv. Everybody leaves and they're left in the shul. And nobody's there to invite them anywhere. Until finally one person noticed them and said, there really isn't a place here. Did you have plans? And they take them finally to their house. And the following day, as he departs from this city, Eliyahu Navi says to the townspeople, "I give you all a blessing. You should all sit in the Mizrach Band," which means on the eastern side, which is a chashva, a coveted, honorable place to sit. And Yoshua ben Levi was again beside himself. But again, he couldn't ask. And the final stop was at another city where they welcomed him graciously. And to them he said, "Each of you should have one person who's an important member in this society." And Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is thinking, why couldn't they get this blessing that everybody here should be as chashuv like the other one? And at that moment, he couldn't handle the questions anymore. He turned to Eliyahu Navi and he said, "Rebbe, I can't. The questions are too strong. Please answer How could it be that the old woman and the old man that had one cow, and they gave you everything that they had, and your bracha to them was that the cow should die? And Eliyahu Navi said, but you don't know the backstory. So let me tell you, I know, and I knew, that this old woman had a gzeira, that she was going to die. And so I gave them a bracha, that the cow should die, in lieu of, in place of the old woman. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi was relieved. But he said, Eliyahu, what about the second one? What about the miser who treated us so rudely, callously, and yet you blessed him, that he shouldn't have the need to be busy with construction and the wall should just automatically be restored? And Eliyahu Navi said to him, well, what you didn't know is that there was a treasure buried in that wall. And had the construction people come and knocked it down, he would have been awarded with that treasure. So how do I prevent that? The blessing of having it restore itself enabled that treasure to remain buried and out of reach. And again, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi understood. But he said, what about the third scene? Remember those townspeople? And remember the townspeople who were so kind to us? And you said, everybody who were not kind. And you said everybody should be honored and honorable. They were the ones who left us in the shul. They abandoned us. Why did they deserve that blessing that they should be honored and get all that kind of cover? And Eliyahu Navi said, you know what happens when everybody wants honor and when everybody's the cook? There's no peace. There's no harmony. That's not a life. That wasn't a blessing. And then Yoshua ben Levi said, what about the last one? And he said, now that's a blessing. A Rav, one Rav in a city that everybody listens to. There's peace, there's harmony, there's blessing. Chashuva students, colleagues, parents, we don't know what is din. We don't know what is judgment. We feel that it is din. It feels hard. It feels painful. But Eliyahu Navi is sharing with us that what looks like din, there's other whole story that we are not privy to. So the rachamim and the din and the rachamim within the din, we need to keep our minds open to that, and we do. We do it 3 times a day, 4 with Kriya Shema Hamita. The beauty and depth of the words of Kriya Shema give off this concept very, very, very strongly and clearly. 6 words. Shema Yisrael. Hashem Elokeinu. 2 midos of Hashem, Rachamim and Din. Hashem midas harachamim. Elokeinu midas hadin. We experience them both. And sometimes we don't know with that din, the backstory. So the Kriya Shema ends by saying, but you should know, Hashem Echad. It is all coming from the Midas Hashem, the Midas Harachamim. But it doesn't look that way, and it doesn't feel that way. And so we cover our eyes to what we see, because what we see is entirely antithetical to what we are experiencing or thinking or believing or hearing that could possibly even be good. What could be good? How could there be rachamim? And that covering of the eyes is important. If you take the first and the last letters of Kriya Shema, and you look at it in the Sefer Torah, and you look at it in our Siddurim, you're going to notice something very interesting about the structure of the word and the letters. There are 2 letters that are enlarged. The first Shema has the very large ayin. The last word, Echad, has a very large dalet. And there's a lot of talk about those letters, ayin and dalet. Ayin is the eye. The dalet is the world we live in, the physical world, 4 corners. The eye in the physical world, it doesn't make sense. We cover it. But then there are 4 letters left that don't get so much publicity, but let's look at them. The Shema without that big ayin has a shin and a mem. The echad, the dalet, when it's taken out, has an aleph and a ches. Shin, mem, aleph, ches. You rearrange the letters, do you know what you get? You get the word esmach. I can feel at peace. I can feel that deep simcha of understanding that I am not running the world. I don't understand what plays out in the world, but I trust, Ribono Shel Olam, you have a cheshbon. You know what's going on in the world. And that gives me the peace, the security, even if I may not understand it right now. My dear girls, Hashem is not a hit-and-run driver. A hit-and-run driver hits, there's the collision, and then he drives on. And we know where we are told that very, very clearly. And I want to show you how beautifully it synthesizes with our dearest Chana Rochel. Take the numerical value of her name, Chana Rochel. Let's take Chana. Are we ready? It's a little late, girls, after a long day of school, but let's do it. Chana. Ches. Say. Nun. Hey. 855. Total? 63. Right? Rochel. Reish. 200. Ches. 8. Lamed. 30. The total, I'm going to use my cheat sheet because it's late for me, and I don't expect you without pen and paper to have it. 238, 63, and 238. Have any of you done this, by the way? Sometimes we do it, right? 63 and 238 is a total of 301. Do you want to know the Hebrew word for 301? It is so delicious when we think of Chana Rochel. Aish. Aleph, Shin, Aish. The first time in Sefer Shmos that we find Aish, and this is where we go back to that hit-and-run driver, and we just see the message for us so clearly. Remember, Chana Rochel Bas Moshe, Simcha, it's all going to come together. Bas means a perpetuation of. It's not just a name. Chana Rochel Bas Moshe. Where is Moshe appearing on the scene to become the future leader of Klal Yisrael? There's a vision. A malach appears in a bush, in a flame of fire, and Moshe's passing by. V'hinei hasneh bo'er ba'esh, v'hasneh enenu kol. Comes Rashi and says, why is sneh? Why is sneh? Why a low bush? And Rashi says, to teach us, we're going to go through hard times. It's pre-Shibud Mitzrayim. It's a time period that Avraham Avinu had gotten Nevuah and Bris Ben Habsarim. He knew that this was going to play out. And don't we wonder why he didn't stop and say, but Hashem, unlike Sodom, when he davened and pleaded 50 and so on, he didn't. Avraham Avinu didn't plead. He accepted the Bris Ben Habsarim Nevuah of our children, his children, being in enslavement 400 years, and then everything else that played out. This is the Sneh Bo'er Ba'esh. What does Moshe Rabbeinu choose to do? He doesn't walk on. He turns, he sees, and he comes closer. Vayar Hashem Kisar Leros. Hashem saw that he turned to see. You're going to hear a lot about Chana Rochel Bas Moshe Simcha turning to look and to notice and to get involved. For right now, the point of the Aish and the fire is the point of Hashem in that low bush with us in the moment of pain. Doesn't leave, doesn't abandon, gives us the koach, the strength, the chizuk, is with us every step of the way. And that's the piece that we wanted to think about. That's the part that if we look for it, we will feel the Ribbon Shalom with us as we move forward. And that piece of moving forward is what we're going to be thinking about now. It's not for nothing, girls. I did not bring my yearbook. I should have. I'm a Beis Yaakov Borough Park graduate. Beis Yaakov Borough Park, we had an emblem. It was a base for Beis Yaakov, and there was a yud inside for the flame. And then there was the handle of the torch. Mrs. Gross, I'm sure you remember, right? And our theme was V'haya Beis Yaakov Eish. We were that fire. We are that light. But I want to take that pasuk and tie it to the Navi Ovadia and Treyasar, one parak, one very small nevuah, one powerful, powerful nevuah for all times. The Navi Ovadia tells us that in the future, at the end of days, we're pretty close to that. V'haya Beis Yaakov Eish, which is where this pasuk comes from. Beis Yaakov is going to be the fire. Ubeis Yosef lakash. Beis Yosef will be the straw. The Beis Yosef lahava. And Beis Yosef will be the spark. Ubeis Esav lakash. And Beis Esav is going to be the straw. V'dalku bahem ba'achalon. And they will light that straw, and you know, like straw burns very quickly, va'achalon, and Esav is going to be consumed. What a powerful, invigorating nevuah. But there's more, and this is where Chana Rochel comes in. You see, Eish is fire. Fire has so many qualities. What are two that come to mind? Warmth and light. Warmth and being a light and shedding light. The Yiddish word for fire is bren. Our dearest Mrs. Stern was a bren. She was on fire, and her warmth that she exuded was felt by everybody. And the light that she shone in the dark corners as they presented lit up those around her and the world around her. The sparks of that fire are what Mrs. Gross was talking about when she said they're there for the grabbing. We are sparks. When we come together, there's the flame. Mrs. Stern is very much a part of us. The guf is no longer here, but the guf is not eternal. The guf is the house that encases, that holds the neshama. The neshama is vibrant and forever. And that flame, V'haya Beis Yaakov Eish, we carry with pride. It's a torch that we carry. And every time we do something, that is fanning the flame and having it once again with all of its fullness and its richness. But let's take the word to Eish and Kash for a moment. V'haya Beis Yaakov Eish, u'Beis Yosef lahava. The Aleph Shin stands for, and I once heard this, I believe again it was Rabbi Kersner, Ahava and Shalom. When Beis Yaakov has those qualities of Ahava and Shalom, which were the hallmark of Mrs. Stern, Chana Rochel Bas Moshe Simcha, Ubeis Yosef Lahava, Mashiach ben Yosef, who will come first before Mashiach ben David, will be the spark that will light the straw, the kash, the kuf and the shin that will be consumed and totally eradicated is what often interferes with ahava and shalom, and that is kina and sinna, which divide, which separate. That is the peace. That is the flame. These are the sparks. Mrs. Gross was talking about some illustrations of specifics, and you will hear many, many more. I just want to explain to you what it means to take the quality and to carry it with you. And I'll illustrate, I'll use an example for anybody who's been in Camp Sternberg and Rabbi Greenwald. I'll give an example of how years later this still perpetuates. He was very, very concerned with cleanliness, and so he always asked us, just pick up one, just pick up one. Just today, as I was walking, I saw something on the ground, and I thought, this one's for you. Remember Budweiser? This one's for you. Bent down, picked up the paper, put it in the garbage. I'm thinking many, many years ago. This wasn't recent. This is how we keep the neshama, which is an eish tamid. It's a fire that's constant as we move forward. When you hear the illustrations that are going to be spoken tonight, grab it. Hamakom yunachem eschem means that this place that's empty now is going to be filled with all of us, her talmidos. And when that happens, it gives us the strength to know, as somebody very wise said, and this gave tremendous nechama to many, that a person doesn't die, it's not over. A person moves from one location to the other. How many girls went off to seminary? They're now across the ocean. They're not with us. They're in another location. Similarly, the neshama is alive and vibrant and moved from this lower world to the upper worlds. And this is the part that we can take as we move forward with the evening. And that's the part that as we see that we can move forward, not on, and we take this with us as we move on, then we will see that the presence is still very, very much here. And so just a thought from the parsha to close. We're told in this week's parsha that when we come to Eretz Yisrael, it was last week's parsha, Hashem instructs Moshe to set up a mizbeach on Har Eval. Har Eval, if you remember Har Grizim and Har Eval, Har Grizim was the bracha, Har Eval was where the clothes were set. And everybody asks, why should the mizbeach be put on Har Eval, which was the mountain of Kloah? And the answer is, because what we don't often understand is even in those circumstances, there is blessing, there is bracha. What is that blessing? What is that bracha? So when we say, Mizmar L'Soda, Du'u, you should know, Ki Hashem Hu Elokim, the Rachamim, the Din, Hashem Hu Elokim, it's followed by the tefillah, Yehi Chavod Hashem Le'olam. Let the glory of Hashem be forever. How do we proclaim Kavod Shamayim, the glory of Hashem? Every time we take our hands and cover our eyes and say, Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. I may not understand, but I am mamlech, you over me, Hashem. You are the melech, and I am machliah, and I humble myself that I'm limited in my comprehension. And we accept anyway. That is the greatest manifestation of kavod shamayim in this world. Yehi chavod Hashem la'olam. That's what we can do to move on, even though, to take the pain as it comes. And from that pain, from that darkness, the light is in that darkness. The Nabi tells us, Ki nafalti kamti, ki eshe bachoshech Hashem arli. Though I have fallen, ki nafalti kamti, I will rise. Ki eshe bachoshech, though I sit in darkness, Hashem arli. The light is within the darkness. And the greatness will emerge from these moments. And so I turn the floor over to Mrs. Gross, who will lead what is coming next. Final pasuk from Treyasa, all the way at the end. The Navi says, Hashem, ba'esh hitzata, you destroyed the building with Aish. Uba'esh ata'asa livnosa. But with fire, you're going to rebuild. That Bayish Shlishi will come down. The words Esmach, Simcha, and Mashiach are very closely related. When we can take that deep joy, the Simcha of connection to the Ribono Shel Olam, keeping our faith, moving forward, fanning the flames and fanning the sparks, we come ever closer as we hear the footsteps ever louder. Hashem should give us all chizuk. Kavei el Hashem, chazak b'ya'ametz libecha. Hashem will strengthen your heart. V'kavei el Hashem. Let's keep that connection and let's be mechuzak.
I can almost feel, Mrs. Marlowe, like those who said, Akiva nichamtani, Akiva nichamtani. The author of Slobodka examines the progression of sin and concludes that if a person's heart wants something bad, they will find a way to see those opportunities all around them. Miklal lav lo dimhein. If a person wants in their heart to think well of people, they will always see the good. As Rabbi Stern expressed it to me last night, Chana Rochel was the ganzkeit of Gutzkeit. She only saw the good in people because that is what her heart wanted. Every person was a Tzelem Elokim. The banker, the dental professional, the housekeeper, the student, even the one who was chewing gum in class deserved to have her dignity maintained. The colleague, the friend, the sisters-in-law, and most especially the family. Each of us, older and younger, was made to feel like $1 million. Like a superstar. We want to think only well of people. That's what you will see. At this time, I would like to ask Mrs. Shoshana Barashansky, a fellow Kola wife, a student of Mrs. Stern, and later a very good friend of Mrs. Stern. Yes, a student who became a close friend. Mrs. Barashansky.
Wow. Honored principals and moros, it's truly humbling to be standing here tonight. And I just whispered to my mother, I can't believe I'm following Mrs. Marlowe. I don't know who the other speakers are, but just bear with me. I have to mention that I have, this is okay? That I have so much Azkara to be Sako, to an entire Mahala who's sitting here and who I miss dearly. And I feel very connected to all of you and appreciative for your contribution in who I am today and who my family has become and my sisters who are still in school and we're endlessly grateful. A few weeks ago, I landed in Newark. We went to visit my in-laws over being Tannen, and it was 11 o'clock at night after an extremely long day of traveling, and I saw that Mrs. Azkara called me. And I still get a panicked feeling when teacher principal calls me. I don't know if anyone else has that, but I wasn't in trouble. And I told my husband, I need to call Mrs. Wexler back. So left the kids, left the bags, and I called Mrs. Wexler back wondering what she could want to talk to me about. And she asked me if I could speak at tonight's Azkara. And my immediate reaction was, of course, because I could never, ever say no to Mrs. Wexler. And endlessly grateful for everything that you have done for me and for my entire family. And you're my principal, still, always. And then my second slightly panicked thought, and it's increasing right now as I'm standing in front of who knows how many people, is why me? Because there are so many people who are so close to Mrs. Stern and are so much more qualified than me to be standing up here in this beautiful tent, which did not exist when I was in school. But our collective grief and our individual loss is so strong, and I hope that I can at least try to represent a little bit of what some of us are feeling, specifically as her student and also as her I wish I could call her my friend, but fellow coal member, and I really did see her as a friend. And the void that we're feeling is overarching, overwhelming, and it's almost impossible to fill. And we're still reeling from the loss of Mrs. Stern. So 2 weeks ago, I packed my kids into the car. I was running mommy camp, which our Hashem is over, and we drove to Miami International Airport to say goodbye to my sister Rayleigh, who was leaving to seminary. And coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, my mother's friend, who is a Harvard-trained lawyer, a very special and unique person, was on the flight. She had been in Florida to represent one of her clients in a court case. And in her literally 2 seconds of catching up to my mother, she relayed the following thing. She said the most impactful part of her being in the court in Florida and her experience as a lawyer was standing in the courtroom during Elul. She mentioned that it's one of the only places in the world where respect is given, demanded, and given. And besides for that, she said that in her preparation for the court case, she made sure that she covered all of the different details that could possibly come up, like a lawyer should do in order to defend the case. And there was one small angle that she touched upon, but it wasn't something that she thought the case would go in. And of course, on the day of the court, she arrived, and that's exactly where the whole entire case went. And it made me think right away about Mrs. Stern, because there are so many times where we're focused on doing this thing and that thing, and we're so busy trying to do the right things. And is it really the things that Hashem is caring about? Is it really the things that we're supposed to be doing? And I thought of Mrs. Stern as the epitome of somebody who had the headset on for the focus of what is the right thing. And she had an unbelievable capacity to put aside all of the narishkeit and all the things that don't really matter, and to focus on that one angle that the court might take. And I think one of the reasons this loss and the void is so large is because when I was thinking about Mrs. Stern, she was somebody who represented a calm among the storm, and it's something that we don't have in so many people. And like, how many people can you go up to them and you can expect how they're going to react? Can I ask my husband? I definitely cannot expect how I'm going to react. We all have moods, we're human. But when we passed Mrs. Stern, whether it was in the hallway, whether it was in the street, you knew how she was going to react. She was going to have the warm smile, the loving greeting, the melodious tone. Hi, Chana, how are you? It was that beautiful sound that I think we're all missing. And it's something that we don't see nowadays, that consistency and the reliability. My father, Alav Shalom, used to say, and I'm sure many of my teachers said this also, but I felt like I had to quote him. He used to share the following verse. He said, the Chana discussed which pasuk properly encapsulates the Torah. And so one Chana suggested, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Another Chana suggested, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And another Chana suggested, Ben suggested, one sheep you should bring for the Karban Tavin in the morning, and one sheep you should bring for the Karban Tavin in the evening. And the point is, more than Kabbalah Ol Malchus Shemayim, and more than establishing our unadulterated belief in Hashem, it is the consistency. And again, I thought of Mrs. Stern, who valued that consistency. And it was something that she gave over to all of us, maybe not in a tangible way, but when we think about her, we can rely on it. And whether it was 15 years ago, and I actually don't know how long ago Mrs. Stern started teaching the school, but 15, 10, 5, or last year, if you walked through the courtyard and you peered through the window, and when I was there, I think in 8th grade, it was the left corner, I can picture so vividly. Mrs. Stern was there and she was banging on the table and shrieking about Antiochus and smiling. I'm sure everyone who's had her can relate to that. And it wasn't the messages or the lessons per se that we remember, but it's the love and the consistency and the reliability of walking into her classroom and knowing Mrs. Stern's going to give a lesson exactly like that, and she's not going to get too upset, and she's not going to get, too excited. Well, she got very excited, but it was that reliability that we came to love and that we miss so, so, so much. So I was really lucky to be her student, and then I transitioned to being a pseudo-adult and moving to the Miami Beach community. My husband joined the Miami Beach community polo. And I was a little hesitant originally because Mrs. Stern was a long-standing member of the Miami Beach community, and I'm like, nothing. But there I was at the first polo meeting, and Mrs. Stern's at the table. I'm like, okay, she's my teacher. But straight away, she put me at ease, like in her natural style. Chana, remember when? I'm like, remember when what? What are you going to say? But the transition that could have been so awkward and could have been a distant relationship, she's my teacher, we're now part of the same co-op, was so normal and comforting, and she made me feel that warmth and that love that I felt when I was her student sitting in her 8th grade classroom. And even a few months ago at the last polo meeting, I can remember when we were sitting in the room and discussing some event, Mrs. Stern said, Mrs. Stern, she turns out of these, she only calls me that because I taught her. It was her way. That was her way to make you feel loved, cared for, and yeah. So another story. So 2 or 3 Rosh Hashanahs ago, I think it was 3 Rosh Hashanahs ago, Mrs. Stern invited us for Patty, remember this? She invited us for Rosh Hashanah, and I said, Mrs. Stern, I think it was the night meal. Yeah, it was me. She invited us, and I said, what can I bring? How can I help? We're so thankful. And one of us knows what that. She said, nothing, just come, probably in voice notes. I'm sure so many of you have your voice notes, and I'm replaying them. Nothing, just come, Chana, just come, okay? Mrs. Stern, please, I would love to bring something. She said, you know what? It was like after a few days, if you don't mind, can you bring a head of the fish? I was like, sure. Trust me, that's much better than any dish I could prepare. Like, okay. And so I walked into Yes Market, and I think they had them sitting on in the fridge section, and a little clear bag with a knot on top. And I was like, okay, I'll take one. I think they were even free. And I brought it home, like, okay, I got a good one. And I bring it to the meal on Rosh Hashanah night, and I'll never forget this. I walked into the kitchen, and all of a sudden I gave Mrs. Stern a bag. She'll allow me to anticipate what happened. The girls were shrieking, Mrs. Stern, shut up! You have to cook that the fish! It's raw! Oh my goodness. I couldn't believe it. I really, really couldn't believe it. But in her natural style, she made it a hilarious thing. Not something where I was embarrassed, that's for sure. Not something where it was like, it's okay, we'll just put it on the table and everyone pretend to eat it. Not that either. It was, clearly I didn't cook growing up. But for all the Bizaki girls, you're supposed to cook out of the fish. But it was that was her natural style, to make you feel comfortable and loved, even when you bring a raw fish. I don't know, she's having night. And it's good to laugh because she really was someone who was full of the energy and warmth, and that was, I'm sure that's a story among many of things that became hilarious. So I think it was last year, I went to Shul, I have to say Yisker for my father, and hopefully no one should know about this, but it's a little stressful, especially when you have little kids. It's a stressful thing in general. But there I was, juggling my Baruch Hashem, 3 little kids, and just trying to make sure everyone looked normal and had a lollipop in their mouth so I could run in and say the tiny Tefillah Yisker. And I remember seeing Mrs. Stern. She came out for a second, and she said to me, Chana, I remember when Rifki and Steve were 14 months apart. And I was like, I okay, I was expecting like the regular reaction, like, oh, I'm so sorry, Rochel, like for Yisker, or like something else like that. Not commenting on the kids. And the message that I took from that interaction was, she was meeting me where I was at, and she was telling me, it's okay. You're doing the best you could do. You have to go see this tefillah. Maybe it's not something you're connecting to at this very moment, but as long as you're focusing on the right things, you got your kids to shul, you made it. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm like, do I even have to say this? I don't think my father really will care, all of that. But really, 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 she was telling me, it's okay. You're doing what you have to do. You're focusing on the right thing. You're continuing onward. And yeah, it's crazy. I remember too when I had 2 kids, 14 months apart, and it was such a hectic life. And it's that her consistency and her ability to tell me that in that moment when I don't think most people would have been able to give me the message I needed to hear. My friend in the Miami Beach pool, I don't know if she wants to mention her name, but she just had her 4th kid, and she told me that when she had her baby, of course, I'm sure so many of us have been reminiscing about my sister in this summer. So this came up in one of our conversations. So she said, this is unbelievable. She said, when I had my baby, Mrs. Stern said, oh, so Mazel Tov, who does she look like? And my friend proceeded to say, oh, I think she looks like this one, I think she looks like that one. And Mrs. Stern said, really? No way. Send me pictures of all the other babies. Like, what? Like, even parent, grandparent, like, cares that much what someone else's baby looks like. It's such an incredible midah for us to pay attention to detail, to meet someone where they are at that moment. And my friend felt so loved because of it. And I'm sure so many of us have had that encounter with her where they felt like Mrs. Stern is paying attention to me. She's giving over her love in such a unique way. So the week before she was niftaris, Rabbi Stern called my husband to ask if we could just go over and dump the kiddie pool. Were you there? No. Because Rabbi Stern was out of town, so my husband said sure. So we go over. I left the kids at the monitor. I'm like, I'm going. We go. The Stern's house is so much fun. We go. We dump the pool 1, 2, 3, and then we come inside. I'm like, hey, but the Stern's like, no, Sean. Do you think I should paint these farm trunks? I'm still in shock. Like, why is she asking me about painting her farm trunks? But it was that consistent desire to connect and to love that we all was so amazing. And I remember walking out with my husband, and I guess I just wanted to share this last memory just because it's like the last memory I have of her. We were just discussing how we want to raise children like the Stern children, how they're so happy and they're so lucky to have always been surrounded by that warmth and the love. And us, as everyone in Beis Yaakov uniforms, we were so lucky to have Mrs. Stern as a teacher, and we have to remember that and take it with us. And so I was thinking that maybe this Elul, we could try to be that sort of person, the consistent person, the person who when someone comes over to you, you give over the consistent, reliable feeling, the love and the warmth. And this morning I was saying with David Hashem, quickly, the pasuk says, Ki avi v'imi azavuni v'Hashem yaskeni, that my father and my mother left me, but Hashem will gather me in. And I always think about this pasuk, it means a lot of things to me on many different levels, but for all of us, people leave us. Mrs. Stern unfortunately left us, but Hashem will gather us in. And we can really have a Chana Chama. And the real way for her neshama to have an aliyah, as Mrs. Marlowe was saying, is to take a part of her and to embody it, to try to emulate it. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and her neshama should have a complete aliyah.
Thank you, Shoshana, for showing us what a Beis Yaakov graduate looks like a few years later. We have now the special source of having someone in a Beis Yaakov uniform representing all of our current students. I'll call right now Ms. Perry Elias from grade 12 to represent all of our Beis Yaakov students. Thank you, Perry.
Hi everyone. I'm very privileged tonight. I feel very privileged tonight to be able to speak about Mrs. Stern because I was connected with Mrs. Stern in many different ways. Firstly, Mrs. Stern and my mother were very close friends for over 20 years, and my family and the Stern family were very close family friends. Mrs. Stern was like an aunt to me. Secondly, Mrs. Stern was my teacher in 7th and 8th grade. She taught me Historia and Parsha. And thirdly, she was my green mechanachas in 9th grade. There's two midos that stuck out in my mind about Mrs. Stern that I'd like to speak about tonight. The first one, and Mrs. Morrow mentioned, is Mrs. Stern had a passion and like a brand and a fire for everything she did, for her teaching, for Yiddishkeit, for everything, even her students. And an example is, I remember a memory when we were sitting in class, diligently taking notes, and Mrs. Stern was saying over a story, and she gets to the climax of the story, and we're all sitting there taking notes in our heads and our binders, and she slams on the desk and says the climax really loud, and we all jumped out of our seats, and I still have that scribble my notes from the shock, and that just shows Mrs. Stern's class. Like that's how she taught. She had such an excitement and such a passion for what she taught, and that really gave over to us a love for Torah. And a second story that I remember is how Mrs. Stern, whenever she would teach us a lesson in her class, she felt very strongly about it, and that's what she believed, and that's what she's a living example of what she taught. An example is she never liked it when people would mumble on their brachos and not say them loud and clearly. Every one of Mrs. Stern's students knows the phrase bracha tachas. That's the word that she would use to describe how we say them when we mumble on our brachos. And Mrs. Stern would always say her brachos loud and clearly, and that she set an example of what we're supposed to look like. And another example of Mrs. Stern had such an excitement for Yiddishkeit and Shabbos and everything. I sat by the Stern on Shabbos, and I have a vivid memory of Mrs. Stern davening Kabbalah Shabbos out loud with such excitement. And every Arab Shabbos in school, she'd walk around with a big smile, wishing everyone a good Shabbos, and every week with the same excitement. And when I was by the Sterns for Shabbos, I experienced Mrs. Stern after she bench left, she went to her front door and opened it, and in her classic Mrs. Stern way, she said in her own words, she opened the front door, she said, "Welcome Shabbos Queen, welcome, come into my home." And I first thought it was like funny, I'm like, is she serious? And then I realized that she is serious and she does it every single Shabbos. That's what she did, like she lived by it. And it meant so much to her. And another thing that I could think of is everyone's pain and sorrow she truly felt. She felt so passionate about all her students, and whenever there's like a tzara going on or a simcha, she truly felt everyone's simcha. I remember I was sitting in the Stern living room with my mother, and there was a certain tzara going on, and we were talking to Mrs. Stern about it, and Mrs. Stern sat there and she said in Yiddish, in her own unique Mrs. Stern way, "Ich kann nicht," which means I can't in Yiddish, because she really felt the pain. She really, really, truly felt everyone's pain and tzara. And she also felt the same for everyone's simchas. When there's a simcha, she was overjoyed and so happy for everyone, and that's what she lived by. A second lesson that stuck out in my mind about Mrs. Stern, a second midah, was she was a very good listener. Whenever a girl had a problem, or whenever a girl needs someone to speak to, she always had a listening ear. Everyone felt comfortable to speak to Mrs. Stern. I got to observe her as my green mechanachas when she would speak to girls out of class, and everyone felt comfortable to speak to her. Not only would she speak to girls, but she would also follow up. Whenever a girl would tell her something, or a mother would tell her something, she'd always call back and be like, what ended up happening with that situation? Because she really, truly, truly cared. And not only would she also follow up, but she was good at remembering details. It's a joke in my family that on our birthdays we get a birthday phone call from Mrs. Stern before we realize it's our own birthdays, because she remembered details and the small things, and she really truly cared for everyone and made everyone feel so special. And a lesson that we can learn from Mrs. Stern is to take that passion and take that brand and excitement for Avodas Hashem and everything we do, and to take the lessons we learned from Mrs. Stern and have an excitement for whatever we're doing in life, and that we should all try to be better listeners to our friends and to our family, and it should be an aliyah of her neshama.
Thank you, Perry. That was very, very special. At this point, I would like to call upon Mrs. Devorah Wexler. In the beginning, Mrs. Stern's fellow co-wife, then a colleague, friend, and co-conspirator in so many quiet works of chesed and much, much more. Mrs. Wexler.
I've stood in front of most of you tens, if not hundreds of times, speaking. I don't usually come with papers. I speak from my heart with prepared remarks in my head. But this was too important, so I prepared my words beforehand. I guess for consistency, Perry basically said everything I was going to say. We had a lot of the same relationships with Mrs. Stern, so it's consistent. And I'm going to share the thoughts. I'm speaking on behalf of all of my colleagues and friends who had the schus of working with and being close friends with Chana Rochel Bas Moshe Simcha Halevi. It has now been 2 months since the terrible tragedy that befell our community and our school with the patira of our beloved Chana Rochel. And since I am speaking to so many of our dear Talmidos, your very special Mrs. Stern. 2 months to mull over the remarkable person that she was. 2 months to feel the very painful void. 2 months to contemplate the absence of a person who was larger than life and who means so much to each and every one of us. There is so much that has already been said about Chana Rochel, and so many facets that can still be uncovered. I would like to focus on a specific contradiction on who Chana Rochel was and what she represented. Yes, I said a contradiction. Chana Rochel filled the room. That, I think we would all agree. Her very presence instantly transformed every moment into an event to be treasured, and everyone wanted to be a part of that. No one laughed like Chana Rochel, with her full heart infused into her contagious and infectious laughter. In fact, when you told her a joke or something funny, you actually started to feel like the funniest person in the world because she made you feel that way. I have a very precious gift that Mimi Eli sent me soon after Chana Rochel was nifter, a 7-second clip of Chana Rochel laughing like nobody ever laughs. No one cared like Chana Rochel. With her compassion and emotional response to whatever you were sharing, the way that she wore her heart on her sleeve. When you were going through it, Sarah, she was right there with you. And your pain felt like her pain because it really, truly was. Like Perry mentioned, the words of Chana Rochel saying, "Ich kenisht," reverberated in my mind because when she heard of a tzara, a difficulty that somebody was going through, she really, really felt ich kenisht. That is Yiddish for I can't bear this pain that didn't belong to her. It belonged to whoever was carrying that, but it belonged to her because that was Chana Rochel. When Tony, our custodian, heard the terrible news, he sat down and he cried bitterly. When we inquired as to the reason for his emotional response, he said, "She was simply such a good person. Just yesterday, she stopped me and she said, 'Tony, I hope they're not working you too hard. Tell them you deserve a vacation and thank you for all that you do.'" Not surprising that this came from our Chana Rochel. No one rejoiced in other people's simchas like Chana Rochel. With her unique way of participating fully, when someone was making a simcha, Chana Rochel was right there with you, in the moment, sharing every aspect of your simcha, even if she couldn't be physically present. Whether she was sitting at your chuppah, or just FaceTiming the Baal Simcha in the middle of the wedding, because although she couldn't be there, she needed to be there. And sending those of us who couldn't be at a simcha that she was physically present, pictures after pictures, so that we could too feel a part of the other person's simcha. She made the simcha. I'll go one step further. When people that Chana Rochel didn't even know well, was very peripherally connected to, maybe it was her friend's relative, or maybe it was her friend's friend, but she heard that they were making a simcha, it became her simcha too. How many of us traveled in for a relative simcha or a friend simcha, and the next morning we received the following text from Chana Rochel: Mazel Tov, I'm sure the wedding was stunning. I'm sure the bar mitzvah was beautiful. Send me pictures of fill in the blank, your niece, your friend, your machatenister, whoever it was. Send me a picture so I can see how gorgeous they look too. I want to see how amazing it was. I want to be a part of it. Like Shoshana mentioned, she wanted to see pictures of her friends' children so she could see which one the child looked like. And I'll give an addendum to that. That friend shared with me that she was talking to somebody else, and they said, Chana Rochel told me that she thinks your baby looks more like the second one than the first one. Well, not only did she get the pictures, but then she compared it, felt it, got excited about it, and shared it with other people around her. Watching her joy when looking at pictures of how beautiful the Balei Simcha looked, or videos of how Lebedik the dancing was remarkable, especially when you consider that she may not have even known these people, but the connection was there nevertheless. No one gave brachos like Chana Rochel, filled with passion and kavanos for all the pieces that we needed in our lives, even those pieces we may not have known. Many of us are fortunate to have voice notes from Chana Rochel of brachos that she gave us on her birthday, or on our birthday, or for no reason at all. She got to the heart of the matter in a way that only she could, and those are treasures that we have forever. No one lived in the moment like Chana Rochel, with her ability to zone in on the person she was talking to and make that person feel like the only person of import at the moment. After 18 years of teaching, it's 18, there have literally been hundreds, if not thousands, of students, parents, and fellow teachers who stood up straighter and felt more secure because they were a part of the special orbit of acceptance and love that Chana Rochel created. I'd like to take a moment to address the hundreds of Talmidos, both past and present, we have here in this room. From the day that your Mrs. Stern began working in Beis Yaakov, you each became one of her girls, and she worried over you, and she davened for you, and she took care of many things for you, some things that you'll never know about. She arranged tutoring when it was needed. She helped out financially and purchased clothing for you when it was needed. She got you into camp, and she sat for hours preparing specialized tests and then reviewing with you so that you could feel successful. She gave information for shidduchim about you, and she read shidduchim to you. She invited you over to her home, and she gave you brachos, and she davened for you. And after sitting at her very chashuv levaya in Lakewood, New Jersey, it became clear that it wasn't just us that considered her role at Beis Yaakov one of the most significant roles she played. Every single speaker that got up to be maspid Chana Rochel Bas Moshe Simcha Halevi mentioned her pride and joy in her role at being a Beis Yaakov of Miami Mechaneches. What a pivotal part it played in her life, and her love, care, and devotion for every one of you. No one was a friend like Chana Rochel. And the proof is that there are about 25 people at least here in Florida, in Lakewood, in Norfolk, Virginia, and probably many other places as well, who each feel that they were Chana Rochel's best friend. And the truth is, they all were. But hands down, the identity that she wore with the most pride, a mantle of honor that she wore with pizzazz, like the capes that she was so well known for, was her role of mommy, wife, daughter, and sister. Watching Chana Rochel navigate all of these roles with grace and dignity was truly a sight to behold. Being a mommy to her precious Rivki and Mendy, Tzvi, Esti, Chavi, and Rechi was her greatest joy, pleasure, and her biggest accomplishment. While Chana Rochel owned the room when she was teaching, when she was at home, she was her husband's wife and partner, working alongside him in his efforts of Harbatzas Torah. And it is clear from the deep bonds that every one of her husband's many chavrusas wives felt towards Chana Rochel that she accomplished her mission here too. When she spoke about her children, my Esti, my Rivki, my Tzvi, my Chavi, my Rechi, my children, my jewels in my crown. Rabbi and Mrs. Stern Shalom Bayis was legendary, and they served as role models in this regard to the many guests that frequented their home. As bystanders who were able to observe the kibbud of aim that she had for her dearest parents, the unbreakable bond she had with her brothers who adored her, her sisters-in-law, her cousins, and the magnificent home that she built, that is a privilege we will never take for granted and taught each of us lessons for a lifetime. So, what is the contradiction that we spoke about a few moments ago? The conundrum that we need to figure out. It is simply the following. How is it possible that a person that is filled with so much greatness and is obviously so extraordinary in so many ways, that such a person could just appear for so long to be regular, to be normal, to be approachable? Until her patira, we all knew Chana Rochel Stern as Chana Rochel. Chana Rochel just appeared to be so like one of us. She was a regular person. She was normal. There was nothing that screamed out, tzaddikas, godless. That didn't happen. She was Chana Rochel. And that, my friends, and my dearest Talmidos, is the final point of her greatness that I would like to address. For a person with such a heart, with such passion, with such a neshama, and possessing such godless, yet to come across as one of the crowd, so unpresumptuous and so normal and so approachable, that is the personification of the greatness of Chana Rochel Bas Meir Simcha Halevi, Moshe Simcha Halevi. May all of us who are so privileged to know her and to love her and to be loved by her continue in her ways and make our lives more purposeful as well. Thank you for joining.
Thank you to all our speakers for their precious words and important chizuk. We know that we will have much to gain as we strive to acquire the midos you spoke about so beautifully. In conclusion, I have a personal akar satov on behalf of myself and all our daughters' mothers, raising the next generation of akaros habayis. When I asked my kala, what do you think of when you think about Mrs. Stern, Allah Shalom? Her answer was immediate. I hear Mrs. Stern's voice many times each week while I am going about my regular work, while I am making plans for my future home, and in any and all settings, and her voice rang out, reminiscent of Mrs. Stern's, "The woman is the base of the base. The woman is the foundation of the home." Thank you, Mrs. Stern and her family, for setting our daughters on the right foundation. Klal Yisrael's future is more secure because of your voice. Let us continue to provide chizuk and growth opportunities to each other. And as a result, may this evening be a true schus and an aliyah for the neshama of Chana Rochel Bas Moshe Simcha Halevi Zichrona Livracha. Tehei Zichra Baruch. At this point, we will conclude with singing some of the heartziger songs that Mrs. Stern loved, as they expressed a deep connection to her continuous growth, striving to greater and greater heights in Ruchnius. Mrs. Marlowe will lead us with these 4 songs.
So what comes to my mind as we get ready to sing, this is our thing, Beis Yaakov Miami, right? Singing in the courtyard. And in my mind's eye, I see Mrs. Stern standing and smiling and shepping nachas, if she wasn't, one in a circle. We may ask, 2 months later still, how can we sing? Ich nashir eshir Hashem. So I'll use other words from David HaMelech's Tehillim. David HaMelech says, Shiru lo shir chadash. It's a new song. Life is a song. It has highs and it has lows. And we sing. It's a shir chadash. Heitivu nagein bisrua. The sound of the shofar is almost going to be blown at the end of next week. We have the tekiah, we have the trua, and we have the tekiah, the shvarim, and the trua. The trua, the 9 staccato sounds. That's the brokenness. But we're going to sing Shir Chadash, deeper and richer. And let's remember, girls, song is a tefillah. As we sing and we think about what we sing, it elevates, it enriches, and it deepens. And it brings out the deepest part of us. So the first song, do we have words? Were they distributed? Okay. But these are words that are known, sung, shalashidis. I want to preface with something that Rabbi Aryeh Zev Ginsburg shared after he experienced a very deep loss. He went to Eretz Yisrael looking for Nechama, and he went to Rabbi Aaron Leib Shleimeh, Zichrono L'bracha, Zecher Tzadik L'bracha, and he said, I need chizuk, I need nechama. And Rabbi Aaron Leib reached out with his hand and he touched his heart and he said, I can't give you chizuk. You need to find it here. And Rabbi Ginsburg wondered about that. Here he is, he's asking for chizuk, and the Gadol Hadar is saying, I can't, you need to find it. But he shared that it took a little bit of time, but then he came across an understanding of what the heart is all about and what Rabbi Aaron Leib was telling him, but he needed to discover it for himself. And he said that the human being really is a prototype of the Beis HaMikdash. The makeup of the human, the Malcolm talks about this a lot, is the model of the Beis HaMikdash. So what is the heart? So what does the heart correspond to? The heart corresponds to the Kodesh HaKodeshim. In the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Kli in the Kodesh HaKodeshim was the Aron. The heart represents the Aron. And what was in the Aron? The Aron had the luchos. Not one set, it had 2 sets of luchos. It had the original luchos that were given on Matan Torah, at the time of Matan Torah, that unfortunately by Chet HaEgel had to be shattered. Those are the shivrei luchos, the pieces of the luchos that were salvaged and held until the Beis Hamikdash was built, and David HaMelech digging the foundation, and then when Shlomo HaMelech brings it, the Aron opens the gates, and in that Aron were the broken pieces and the intact, 2 sets of luchos. And then Rabbi Ginsburg says, I understood what the Gadol Hadar was telling me. We need to find it in our hearts, the shivrei luchos and the whole luchos. We can have both emotions simultaneously. The heart is a muscle, it expands. It can feel intense pain while also experiencing the intense joy, the sparks that we want to carry on. So how fitting to sing the song of Bilvavi. In my heart, Bilvavi Mishkan Evne, Ulener Tamid Ekach Li Es Eish HaAkeda. What are we going to light our souls with? The fire of the Akeda and the sacrifice. It's our carbon, and we're giving it, and we're dedicating it. And this we start with Mrs. Stern's Song and Song of Life. This was her Bilvavi Mishkan Evne. So let's sing those. We'll try to start on the right note because it goes very high. Bilvavi Mishkan Evne, Adar Kevodo, Mishkan Mizbeach Hasim, Likarnei Odo. Can I invite you to reach out to the girl sitting next to you and put your arm over her shoulder? Let's give each other a little strength. That's the connection. For all the chizuk and the strength and the imo anochi b'tzara that Chana Rochel Aleha Shalom displayed just by virtue of her being, and the reminding that no matter what, and no matter when, and no matter how big, the Ribbon Shalom is with us. It's in our DNA to keep moving forward. 'Cause a yid never breaks, and a yid never bends, and a yid never gives up in the night. A yid perseveres through the deepest despairs. His emunah strengthens him for the fight, and a yid understands that Hashem has a plan, and that's all it takes to make it through. His Tata loves him, that's what a yid holds on to. Through the darkest of times, and we may not understand. But remember I told you Listen to how many times I mention Eliyahu Hanavi in the stories, going back to Eineth Nasan Lechorva, going back to understanding that there's Rachamim and there's Din, and who knows which one is which, because what we think is Din is really Rachamim. In the Gemara, there are many times that there are complexities that are unresolvable. And the acronym that's placed in the Gemara at that point of inability to resolve are 4 letters. And we say it as a word. It's called Teku, Taf Yud Kuf Vav. And it stands for Tishbi, Yitaretz, Kushiyos, Ubayos. Which literally means we're stuck here in this thorny knot here in the Gemara. When Eliyahu Hanavi comes, we'll understand. But on another level, when we experience things in life that are challenging, that are incomprehensible, we say, Teku, Tishbi, Yitaretz, Kushiyos, Ubayos. And there will be that time. Umola haaretz deya es Hashem. The entire world will know with clarity Hashem hu Elokim. It's midas harachamim. But we wait for those times, and we daven that they happen soon. Ani ma'ameh, emunah shelema, bebias hamashiach, ani ma'ameh. This could be a tefillah as well, girls. Ani ma'ameh, emunah shelema, bebias hamashiach, ani ma'amin bi'af al pi she'yismanei ya'im kol zeh achakelo b'chol yom she'yavo b'chol yom she'yavo bi'af al pi she'yismanei ya'im kol zeh achakelo b'chol yom she'yavo b'chol yom she'yavo. One final story for Yossi. Of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi and Eliyahu Hanavi. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi asked Eliyahu Hanavi when Mashiach is going to come. Eliyahu Hanavi said, go to him and ask him. And he told him to go by the walls of the city. And he went there and he saw Mashiach sitting. He was an ani, and he's wrapping bandages, wrapping and unwrapping, and wrapping one section at a time. And he asked him, Mashiach, when are you coming? And Mashiach said, Hayom, today. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi was so excited. He couldn't wait. Today's the day. And the day is passing. And the day is passing. And the day passed. And he went back to Eliyahu Hanavi and he said, I don't understand. I asked Mashiach, he said today, but he didn't come. And Eliyahu Hanavi said, but he said today, right? Hayom, in the kolo tishmo, is the end of that statement. Very possible today, in our hands. In the kolo tishmo. Di'af al pi she'yismanei ya'im kol zeh achakelo b'chol yom she'yavo b'chol yom she'yavo. Which brings us to our final song. It's a song, it's a tefillah that mothers sing and say, by Adlakas Neros. It's the tefillah, the hope of every mother for their children. How fitting to sing this song for Mrs. Stern, Alea Shalom, Chanarako Bas, Moshe Simcha Halevi, Alea Shalom. Shabbos was the highlight of her week. When Perry described the opening of the door, that has to be somebody who lives with Shabbos every day of the week, so that she is Mikabel Shabbos. You know that word Mikabel? Remember Yehi Chavod? When we can be Mikabel what happens in our lives, and be Mikabel it in a way that's deep and accepting, right? That's the ultimate Kavod Shamayim. But there's another Lashon of Mikabel. We can accept, and then we can receive. We want to receive the blessing, the bracha of the Ribono Shalom. We need to be the kli. We need to be the vessel to receive that bracha. Shabbos is Makar HaBracha. Mrs. Stern prepared, she loved to set a gorgeous table. That's what I heard. She loved to set a gorgeous table. Setting a table is a metaphor for being prepared and ready. A gorgeous table is putting everything into it. She didn't do the guf of the mitzvah, she did the neshama of the mitzvah. She captured the spark and the essence. So that when Shabbos came, she opened that door and she is ready to be Mekabel Shabbos. She was ready to receive what Shabbos has to offer. It doesn't mean what time is Hadlacha, okay, I'm being Mekabel Shabbos. I'm lighting so that Shabbos is in my house. She prepared, she was ready. We're going into a new year. We want to be Mekabel and greet the new year. But we have to be ready. We have to be that kli. We have to be the vessel so that whatever we ask and whatever Hashem sends us can come to us. Our focus for the year, instead of saying, I want to have a good year, the thought for Rosh Hashanah is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to have a good need. I want to be the kli, to be ready to get and to receive everything you have for me. The biggest nachas we can give, a teacher who has given of her neshama to her talmidos who are her children. The biggest tefillah is that the v'zakeni, the gadol banim, banim uvnei banim. We are the generations, the continuity, we perpetuate. Ume'ira nes ha'olam, to light up and radiate as she did, her warmth, her fire, her passion. With Mrs. Stern around, nobody ever felt invisible. Ever. When there's a concert, my dear girls who are here, if you can be the ambassadors, and there are so many girls who don't feel comfortable, they feel awkward, they feel unnoticed, they feel invisible. One aspect of Mrs. Stern that we can do as we sing now is to pull somebody into the circle. Notice those who don't feel noticed and bring them in. That's the biggest nachas that we can give. That's the tefillah of Mrs. Stern, that all her children, Me'ira Nes Ha'olam, the Masim Tovim, these are her deeds. These are her natural masim that we are hoping to be able to incorporate. And with this we will end. Zakeini legadel, animu meivan, achamim ulevarim. Orabei Hashem, Yirei Elokim, Anshe Emes, Zera Kodesh Hashem Dekim. Zakeini legadel, animu bnei banim, achamim ulevarim. Orabei Hashem, Yirei Elokim, as well, quoting Rabbi Shapiro, who once shared this thought on an Erev Rosh Hashanah in May Elul. Ilu David Hashem Ori, David HaMelech says, Hashem Ori v'Yashim mimi ira, Hashem ha'os chaya, you are my strength, mimi echod, v'krov olayim re'in lecholis v'sarit, sarai v'arbayli, in tachaneh olayim machaneh lo yira libi, in takum olayim milchama, I have my security, b'zos ani boteach. And he says, Achash sha'alti me'es Hashem. But I believe it was Rabbi Karlina, the Karlina Rebbe, who said this. A little bit of a nuanced twist on it. In tachaneh alay machaneh lo yira libi, in takum alay milchama, bizos ani boteach achas. With this I am secure. Achas. One small change. One small Kabbalah. One midah, one aspect of the many that were put out, of learning to be a good friend to many, so everyone is visible. That's what we want. Lulei Hamanti has the Lamed Vav Lamed Aleph with dots. I heard this in the name of Rabbi Shapiro as well. The reverse of that word is Elul. So many times in Elul we say, if only this, if only that. With Chana Rochel's Patira, there were echoes of if only as well. If we do the Achas, that is a forward motion, moving forward, which guarantees us, Bizos ani boteach. I can feel calm, I can feel secure. We're moving forward now in Elul. I ask the Ribono Shel Olam, please, I want to be a better me. And this is what I have in my hand. Here's my plan. Here is my Elul plan. I'm not just saying it. I have a plan. Achash sha'alti me'es Hashem osa avakish. This is what we ask for. I know it's one extra song, but can we just sing the song? Achash sha'alti me'es Hashem, achas sha'alti me'es Hashem, osa avakesh, achas sha'alti me'es Hashem. May we herald in a year of bracha, of simcha, of bren, a year of shalom, a year of ahava, a year she'imale Hashem kol mish'alos libeinu l'tova, a gemar chasim, a ksiv chasim tova, and let's remember to please cook our fish heads.